New alarm bells ringing tonight on the coronavirus outbreak in this country.
Doctors say the virus is spread through droplets when someone coughs or sneezes.
And I think the business community, it's in their interest that people actually stay home and stop the spread.
For a business that can allow more employees to telecommute, we want you to do that.
Hi, friends. I'm Andy Paul, host of the Sales Enablement Podcast, and I want to encourage you to listen to my brand new special 6-part podcast miniseries titled Selling with Purpose. The team behind Sales Enablement Podcast and I put together this incredible series of inspiring conversations exploring what it means to sell with a mission greater than just hitting your numbers in this era of COVID-19 and beyond. So tune in to hear from world-class enterprise sales leaders and learn how their 6 companies will close $50 billion selling remotely. See how they've supported essential workers with the products and services they need to stay safe and thrive during this time of crisis. Subscribe to Selling with a Purpose now on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Guided Selling from RingDNA makes your entire sales team more effective by revealing exactly what reps should do and when to do it. Guided Selling works by transforming sales data into a curated list of prioritized sales actions. So when reps start their day, they'll never again wonder which prospects and accounts or hot inbound leads to reach out to next. Guided Selling even shifts reps' priority in response to real-time buying signals. Finally, even new reps can sell like seasoned ones. Let RingDNA be your guide to success. Learn more at ringdna.com/guided selling. That's ringdna.com/guided selling. It's time to accelerate. Hey friends, this is Andy. Welcome to episode 696. That's episode 696 of Accelerate, the sales podcast of record. Well, before we get started, I just want to ask, how's everyone's new sales year? Off to a good start? Well, I have another excellent episode this week to help you get things off to a good, strong start. Joining me today is my friend Anthony Iannarino. Anthony is the author of multiple best-selling books, including his latest one, Eat Their Lunch, Winning Customers Away from Your Competition. Now, I have to warn you, before we get started, we cover a ton of ground in this conversation today. It maybe runs a little bit longer than the normal episode of Accelerate, because when we get started, we can talk about sales and learning a business forever. So, Anthony is one of the few people I know who reads as much as I do. In fact, he may even read more. And he's going to share with us some great book recommendations. And following up on that, we're talking about the importance of continuous learning if you want to reach the top of the sales game. And we're talking especially about reading and why as sellers and sales leaders, you really shouldn't overly focus on sales books. We're touching the value of why you need to combine disparate areas of knowledge, something outside of sales, combine it with your sales knowledge to create something greater. We'll also go into depth on the importance of relationships in sales. I mean, you all know how I feel about this. A huge believer. Anthony is also a big believer in the importance of this. And he's going to share some of his great insights about why he believes people matter more than process. So there's much, much more than that. You definitely want to listen all the way to the end. As I said before, it runs a little bit long, so you might want to listen at 1.5 speed if you're short on time today. Now, before we get to Anthony, I want to take a quick second to talk about the Sales House. As you know, the Sales House is a personal professional growth program for B2B sellers. Now, as sellers, we don't have a lot of control over many of the things that have an impact on our jobs. The products we sell, the pricing, features, a specific customer set, our territory, customer service, all those things. But what we can control is how we conduct ourselves in front of our buyers. I mean, all those other factors I mentioned, they pale in comparison to how we connect and build rapport with our prospects, how we engage the interest of our buyers, how we build trust, and how we deliver value that inspires them to want to do business with us. So that's my focus for you at the Sales House, is to enable you with the knowledge, the skills, the confidence, and the acumen to become the very best sales version of you. Now, I've been in sales for more than 4 decades, and I've seen plenty of people pushing empty promises. However, I will tell you, if you invest just 10 minutes a day of your time in the Sales House, 10 minutes a day for an entire year, you'll never worry about hitting quota ever again. So come on in, you're going to get unlimited access to coaching, content, and a community of motivated peers who know that to learn more means to earn more. come visit us at the Sales House. That's thesaleshouse.com or thesaleshouse.com/join. All right, let's jump into it with my guest today, Anthony Iannarino. Anthony, welcome to the show.
It's good to be back.
It's great to
Not
have
my
you.
first time here.
It's been a while. So I always love looking at your library behind you. Even though this is audio for many people, I'm looking at Anthony, and behind Anthony he's got his shelves and shelves of books, which always very impressive. Because I know you've read them. That's the thing.
I've read something close to just over 30% of them. And so the interesting thing about having a shelf of books behind you is you can tell that a person who has a giant shelf of books like this feels like they're missing something that they need.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm still trying to find more things that are useful. You can't see the stack of books that's right here on the desk either, but there's a giant stack of things I'm working through right now.
Well, mine are all here. With a bad back, mine are all on the iPad. So yeah.
It's an indication that there's still a lot for me to learn. So I spend all my time trying to be slightly less dumb.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Me too. I mean, that's one I tell people that having done this podcast and nearly 700 episodes is that it's really the most selfish thing I've done in my life because I get to talk and I have spoken with 700 really smart people and I've learned a ton.
Yeah, slightly less dumb.
Yeah, every day a little less dumb than I was before. So, and I think that's a good aspirational thing for salespeople I talk about is just a little bit smarter every day. Because it is cumulative, right? It's our experiences, the things we learn, something we pick up. We don't know when we pick it up and when we might use it, but suddenly one day you're in front of a customer, it's like, oh yeah, I heard this. Maybe I'll try this.
You can't really do lateral thinking, and start broadening out that way, and unless you have different things that have come in from different places at different times that don't make any sense until they sort of click into place for you. There was a guy named John Boyd who was an Air Force colonel, and if his work is basically it's called the OODA loop. Right. But one of the things that he used to talk about was you have a lawnmower, you have skis, you have a chair, and you have all these things, and they tend to be disparate and there's nothing in common about them. But if you put it together, it's a snowmobile, and so that's the kind of thing where you can't have that idea unless you bring in all kinds of things from different places. So that's why so many books.
Well, I think that's a challenge for sales in general and every profession. Well, we're talking about sales. So how do they keep learning? I mean, obviously podcasts, it's a great way to learn, but I just did an assessment for a client of a sales team and asked the question, what sort of sales training had they had? And this was, I'd say on average, probably about 10 plus years of experience. So a fairly senior sales team across this, 25 people, a little under 25. And yet only one or two had ever had any sort of formal sales training. And not that I think formal sales training is that valuable necessarily, but I mean, I've been in sales 42 years. I had 2 weeks of sales training my first year on the job, pretty much it. But it brings the question, I've always been like you, a motivated, self-motivated learner, is how do we help the people who aren't?
Well, training's certainly one choice. And I mean, there's a lot to be said for training, but there's a lot to detract from that as the starting point. So training, this is the interesting thing. So I have to come in as your trainer. I've got to give you 6 major concepts. I've got to give you the strategies, the tactics, the trade-offs so you understand when to use what and why to use it and then how to use it. And I'm supposed to get you perfect understanding in an 8-hour day. And then you're supposed to have, as the learner, perfect recall and retention and perfect execution for the rest of your life after seeing the concept once. So when you start with that, you realize the ridiculousness of thinking that training by itself is going to be able to make some sort of a transformational change, because it's not, and it takes more than that. And it's almost, you and I have had a long conversation before we hit the record button, so nobody got to hear any of that. But as people who are lifelong learners, it's the cumulative. It's not just my experience. Experience is important for sure. I mean, I would call it situational knowledge. You got knowledge from situations that you can now apply. But at the same time, you have to start continually figuring out what else is interesting? What else is useful? What do my clients care about? What are some of the challenges that are going on? And in the book Eat Their Lunch, there's the mindshare section, and I teach people how to think about what trends are going to impact your client's business. What should they be thinking about? What should they be starting to prepare, or are they maybe behind in preparing for making the change that they're going to need to make? And the first question I get is, where do you get those insights? And I'm like, Google. You go to Google and you type in 10 trends impacting distribution companies, and you read 10 articles and you try to say, okay, well, these 4 themes seem to be the biggest drivers. And then you talk to your clients about that and say, tell me how you're dealing with these trends. And they give you information, and you share some information with them, and you get a little less dumb from day to day, and you go out and continue to learn about business and how to create value for other people and what's going on in the world that you live in. And I think it's a lifelong endeavor. And I think the most successful people in any human endeavor are perpetual students.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, it's because they have the emotional intelligence to say, okay, I don't know everything, and I want to learn. I mean, it's like the whole Dunning-Kruger effect, that we've talked about in the past, where people don't know about this. Dunning-Kruger researchers from Cornell studying. I forget who they studied at the time for the subjects of their study, but basically found this syndrome, this phenomenon, this effect they called it. People overestimate their knowledge and lack the emotional intelligence to understand that they don't know as much as they think they do.
Right. And then there's the opposite. So I'm the opposite of that. I'm afraid I don't know things. So I'm horrified. Like, what don't I know? I need to keep looking, because there might be something that's super useful that I haven't come across yet.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that one of the studies there that you're referring to, they ask people, are you a better than average driver? Mm-hmm. 90% of people think they're a better than average driver. Well, that's mathematically impossible, right? You can't be, but everybody believes that. And I think it's true for sales too. We mistake our experience, our time doing something, as some indication of competency. And the person who is the expert on experts, Kay Anders Erickson from Florida, my favorite quote I've ever heard him say was, I think, in Fast Company, and he said, "I've been walking for 48 years, but I don't feel like I'm getting any better at it." Mm-hmm. And I think that's it. So just because you've been doing it doesn't mean you're necessarily improving.
Yeah, well, I think it's that sort of humility that you've talked about here, which is really what it is. It is humility at the end of the day, is to say, look, yeah, I don't know everything. And, for me, it's always sort of this paranoia. Like when I talk to clients, it's like, they're going to say something I'm just not prepared to answer. And so how do I prepare for that? Right. And to your point, experience, reading, what are things that are interesting and exciting happening in their business? What can I learn about what they're doing? And just being a little paranoid about it.
Yeah, I like that you described it as humility, because I like being accused of having a virtue, but for me, it's just fear. Like, there's something I don't know that I need to know, so where am I going to find that? And I keep reading.
Yeah, well, I had a conversation with someone who was saying that, talking about confidence. And I'm outwardly very confident, but on the inside, right? It's like, somebody's going to lay something on me I'm just not prepared for. A few weeks ago, I presented in front of, I think the same day you spoke to the Enterprise Sales Forum in Chicago, I was speaking to the one in New York. But we just did an open Q&A the whole time, which was, sort of a little nerve-wracking, going into this, because a lot of smart people in the room ask questions about sales. But, through virtue of learning, being open to new experiences, trying to broaden my base of knowledge as much as I could, I think I squeaked by. And didn't embarrass myself. But, if I just had been sort of single track my entire career, I wouldn't have been able to do it. Yeah, right. I mean, and that's why I think the thing about learning is you should be diverse. Don't people ask, what sales books do you read? Well, I read all of my friends' books. I mean, that's a lot of books to start out with, to begin with. When you write your next book, I wrote a foreword for one of your books. I mean, and I'll read that book because you're my friend, and we're going to send out a newsletter and tell people to go buy your book. That's what we do for each other. But I'm mostly
I mean, sitting next to me right here is The Hope Circuit by Marty Seligman about positive psychology. It's his biography.
Which I bought on your recommendation, by the way.
Such a good book.
I haven't read it yet, but it's in my iPad, ready to be read.
On next to that is a book called Like War about how all the social channels are impacting things in like warfare and other things. On top of that is James Clear's Atomic Habits,
which I have.
And next to that is a book by about Bill Belichick, the football coach. So I think you got to go wide. And then my strategy is go wide and read lots of things, and then go deep when you find something that really, really captures your imagination and your attention. Then you go deep and read everything.
Yeah, well, I'm like
you. Go wide again. You start go wide again, and then you go deep, and then you go wide again, and all of a sudden you're slightly less dumb.
Yeah, well, I publish a daily email to my list, Sales Insights, and every book I read, and I'm like you, I read the sales books of my friends, basically, is about right. And otherwise,
but you have a lot of friends, to be fair.
A lot of friends, and also a lot of guests on the show. I read all my guests' book, but
right.
But yeah, we talked last time you and I spoke, but we were talking about reading the book *Sapiens* by Yuval Harari.
Right.
I mean, it's a book about the brief history of humankind. Is I think subtitle on that. Fascinating book. I love the topic. Endlessly fascinated about human evolution, human development, so on. But yeah, I'm writing about insights from that book in my sales newsletters.
Sure. It all applies. I've got Robin Dunbar's Human Evolution of the same line.
Mm-hmm.
Another really good one explaining why you can only have 150 relationships and how communication and language evolved and how that developed.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the interesting parts on there is the fact that social grooming for human beings is so expensive that laughter and comedy may be one of the ways to groom multiple people at the same time. And it's developed in primates. And so you start reading this thing, and it's a different view on how we became what it is that we are right now. It's a very interesting book.
Interesting. Laughter and social grooming. I like that.
You're not going to pick that up outside of, somebody like Dunbar's work. So you have to go wide. So you bump into those things.
Well, and this gets to a point you and I were talking about before we started recording is you have to make sure you read things that maybe you don't agree with as well. I mean, somebody wrote me a very nice guy who gets my daily emails and wrote this very long response about how he disagreed. And it was like, love it. I mean, that's good. Fantastic. I mean, first of all, I may learn something from you disagreeing with me that I hadn't thought about. So I like that. But just, read things you don't always agree with.
Yeah, and I'm not going to let people into our entire conversation that we had before this, but you can't be sensitive to ideas that you don't like. I mean, you have to go look at it and say, somebody else thinks that this is valuable. They're finding value. They're producing a result through that idea in some way. So you go look at it and you say, does it have application? And I've studied Ken Wilber's work, Integral Theory, for a long enough time to know that no one is capable of 100% error. No one. So everybody has a partial truth in something.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can see the partial truth and then say, okay, I see where the application of this makes sense, then you're starting to open yourself up to new choices.
Well, and as valuable, though, is the inverse is true as well. No one can be 100% right.
Nobody has 100% of the truth either.
Right.
That's true. That's right.
So as long as you're aware of that, and then you have a sense of, I want to fill that gap, just know that that's a lifelong pursuit, right? I mean, you're never going to...
Your life's not going to be that long.
Well, given that the state of knowledge changes so rapidly.
Yes.
By definition, you would never catch up. So tell us a little bit about the new book, because I want to make sure we have time on that here.
The new book, Eat Their Lunch, was originally titled The Competitive Displacement Playbook. And so this is stuff that people may not know. As an author, you don't generally get to name your own book. So when you go to a publisher, they tend to have strong feelings, and especially my publisher, they have very strong feelings about titles.
Yeah.
The first book I wrote was called 17 Elements, and they're like, yeah, we hate that. And then it was called The Only Sales Guide You'll Ever Need. Even though it was a competency model, they're like, nope, we're not going to put that book out. And then the second book was called The Art of Commitment Gaining, and it ended up with the title The Lost Art of Closing.
Right.
And close, but not quite the same. This book had the most generic title of all titles. It was called The Competitive Displacement Playbook. because what I was trying to write was a playbook for competitively displacing your competitor inside your dream clients. That's what I was writing.
Mm-hmm.
And Nikki Papadopoulos, who is the head of the editorial staff at Portfolio, was at lunch and they were talking about books. And she said, the book is called Eat Their Lunch. And then the romance with Portfolio ended, I know, because they never asked what I thought about the title. I just got a note saying, this is going up on Amazon on Monday.
Right.
And if you have any changes to the summary, let us know immediately. And when I saw it, I smiled. And as soon as anybody sees the cover with the lunch bag being taken in the title, they smile.
Yeah, it's a better title, FYI.
Well, I knew you weren't going to spare my feelings. We just got talked about not being sensitive to ideas that you don't like. But yeah, it is a really good title and far better than mine.
Yeah.
That's why they do some of the naming there, because that happens. But there hasn't been a book written about the fact that this is a competition. It's a zero-sum game. For most of us, we don't swim in a blue ocean. You know, I love the idea of the blue ocean strategy. It's great. Be Netflix, be Airbnb, come up with something that's going to be
brand
difficult.
new market, right?
Yeah, try it. But what about the 18 million people that are in sales right now who don't have the opportunity to go and create some sort of compelling differentiation that makes a new market where you're actually going to be able to sustain that without having to work hard and without the salesmanship necessary for a competitive displacement? Since there was a gap, and I spent most of my time working on this, over the course of a lifetime, it's really all I've ever done. I've never had a lead. I've never had anybody generate leads for me or give me lists. All I've ever had was a list of targets of people who I knew I wanted, that I had to go get somebody out of my seat and take that from them. So it's what I knew. And it's what I've been leading to with the first two books, was trying to get to this point where I could start sharing the concepts in this book to say, if you can be somebody worth buying from and you know how to control the process and create value for other people and help them make change, then you can go and make the most significant change, which is I have to remove somebody you've done business with for 10 years to come in and give you the better future that you're going to need right now. And that's the book that I wrote.
Yeah, I mean, I looked at it even a little more broadly, though, because I think that there's a tendency on some people when they might read the title is to think, okay, well, I'm just trying to displace, a competitor, an existing competitor. But the fact is, any sales situation you go in, I think almost any, short of the blue ocean side, there's an existing solution. And you're having to displace that existing solution. It could be the status quo. But I mean, I've never gone into a place where I'm advocating for change where I'm not displacing some way of doing business.
And even more than that, you get a limit to the number of pages you can put in a book, but there's another couple chapters. I have to also displace what you think your priorities are right now. So
yes.
When you walk in, so I'm also displacing, this is my number one and number two. The idea that you come in as number 8, how do you move up that list? That's
exactly.
That's a whole different conversation, but you're right. You're displacing something.
Yeah. I mean, it's, and I think, given the high rate of no decisions that people get in their pipeline, some of it's just bad salesmanship, if I can say that. But the other is, just didn't give them a compelling reason to buy. You didn't create the value for them to say, look, you should be making the change.
It's worth changing. Yeah. And there's switching costs. And I think we underestimate switching costs. And I think we underestimate how difficult it is inside companies to get consensus. I mean, I think it's very difficult. You have a lot of competing interests, and almost the more people that get piled into the process, the more competing interests you have. And it's easier to say, we all still have to work together, so let's do nothing. We'll just kick this down the road and we'll look at it later on, rather than having to have these difficult conversations that, Andy or Anthony comes in and tells us we have to have. Like we agree it's true, but getting it done is really hard. And do we have the bandwidth? And do we really want these people to be unhappy for the next 2 years? There's a lot. It's complicated. Human beings are complicated.
Well, yeah, which I think is underappreciated by many, many sellers, because you go in those organizations that we see. People think I pick on the SaaS industry. I don't mean to pick on them, but you have these completely sort of metric-driven sales processes that don't allow for the fact that you're really dealing with a human on the other side, right? Because as long as we know we can do X amount of activity and we generate X amount of or Y amount of prospects or orders, a lot of companies are just satisfied to do that.
right? If I do 100 things and I get 5 orders, if I want double, I do 200 things, I get 10 orders, as opposed to how can I do a better job of creating value for those I'm actually engaging with so I can close 10 out of 100 instead of 5.
So you're criticizing the SaaS industry from a place of love and a place where I'm trying to help and be useful, giving you some better thinking. So that's the first thing I'll say. The second thing is a lot of what comes out of Silicon Valley denies the interior of human beings, like their values, their beliefs, their cultural issues, things like that. And it's mostly they're mostly behaving as scientific materialists. So, I can objectively measure that I get 100, and if I do 100, I get 5. So now I have this objective measurement.
Don't call it science, though.
But that's their view. Right. So that's their view, and
it's math.
And it's math. And the truth of the matter is that I go with Neil deGrasse Tyson on this, who says as soon as human beings enter any endeavor, it immediately goes nonlinear. And this is why physics is easy and sociology is hard. And that's it. So the physics part of it's really easy, bits and bytes and numbers and math. Math tends to work. But even that is to deny the fact that we're dealing with people's beliefs, their fears, the things that they want, the struggles that they're having internally, consensus building, all of these other very, very human things. And for me, and I wrote it at the end of the book, I think the more people go towards transactional behavior and beliefs, the more that being a human and being super relational is going to tilt the playing field deeply in your direction. You're going to be running downhill because the human part of it's what still matters more than anything else.
I agree. And I've written about this as well and talk about it as a huge believer that as we get more technology into selling, as we get more AI handling bits and pieces of it, that the ability to be human is your differentiation. And
I just like it when people say AI because I always believe they're talking about me. Like we need more AI.
We need more. Well, of course we need more AI, right?
I like it.
You're gonna have your next book. You have to play on that more specifically. AI in sales. And
I like it.
I don't mean artificial intelligence.
We should let AI manage our entire sales process.
There we go. Perfect. But I think you're absolutely right. I mean, and you talk about throughout the book, you talk about the value of the relationship. And it's funny, the early 2018, there were people you and I both know talking seriously, semi-seriously about, the value, or lack of value of relationships in sales, which I couldn't have disagreed with more strongly and said so at the time. Where's that come from? Why, in your opinion, where does it come from?
I think right now, for some reason, and particularly on LinkedIn, for some reason, there tends to be the statement of an idea as fact that excludes any other idea from being able to exist in the same space. So you can either be likable or you can be competent, but you can't be both. So you can be really smart and have great ideas and challenge people, or you can have good relationships with people where you have trust and caring and being known, liked, and trusted still matter. And every time I see this, I think the person that when you see an idea that's displayed in those terms, take the word or out and throw it away and just put and, because you should be super competent and super smart and able to challenge someone's view, which I call mind share, shifting the lens that they're looking at the world through. And you should be somebody that they actually want to do business with. Those two ideas are not mutually exclusive. But I think some of the conceit here that you see in LinkedIn is because I'm not likable, then I'm going to say that it doesn't have to be important. And the mistake that's being made there is the detriment is not being a likable person. Being likable is super helpful. And look, if we're being honest, if you're super attractive, you've got great charisma, you're super likable, your rapport skills are probably faster than everybody else's because that's the unfair way that the world happens to be structured. But what they're really saying, I think, is that the desperate need to be liked, the part of you that says, I'm afraid of telling the truth to this client because I'm afraid they're not going to like me, that is a detriment to sales for sure. but it would be better to have the relationship than not have the relationship. And I hear from salespeople, and I imagine you do too, where they think, how do I displace that competitor when they've had a relationship with this person and they want to keep the relationship with that person and they won't let them go even though I have the better product? Yeah, that's because they have the relationship, and relationships are hard to unwind. And even when you have the right solution, it doesn't always matter. But you want both. You want the relationship, and you want the insight, and you want the ability to create greater value. You want all of those things. And the intangibles count. And I imagine you agree with me here, but I think the intangibles count for more than the tangibles in most cases. And they're hard to measure and hard to teach and hard to train. So we pretend like they're not what matters. We go, no, Andy, we need a really good process. But you're giving the process to someone who has terrible intangibles.
Right. Yeah, I just wrote about this last week. And the process doesn't win deals, people do.
Right.
And because I was reacting to something, I'd read an article. Actually, the article was a little old and maybe a couple years old, but it stated, if I'm a salesperson and I don't have a process to tell me when it's time to close a deal, what am I going to do? I'm like, what are you talking about? You need a process to tell you when it's time to close? I mean, if you have a relationship with the person, they're going to tell you when it's time to close.
You're not going to have trouble figuring that out if you're paying attention.
Right. So, and I think that gets back to this, people just misunderstand this idea of relationship. People automatically gravitate to this idea that you have to be friends with someone. And you use the term likable. I think that's really the critical term. I always talk about you want your prospects at a minimum, they need to be positively neutral about you.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I would like them leaning towards, I very much would like to work with this person.
Yeah. But I mean, they don't want to go out and have a drink with me necessarily. That's fine.
You don't want them to say like, he's really smart, but I can't imagine having to work with him. That's not good. They're making a decision as to who they're going to have as a relationship, whether you want the relationship or not. The nature of the relationship can still yet to be defined. But the fact of the matter is, if I have to work with you and I have to sit down and deal with you and you're a difficult personality and you're really smart, I can find somebody really smart who's not a difficult personality. So the conceit that people who write this way is that they think, well, if you're smart, then you don't have to also be a person that's good and easy to work with. Well, that would be true if there weren't people that had both of those assets. So again, it's not mutually exclusive. You should work on developing all of these things.
Yeah, well, I think
a whole third of the book is intangibles because they matter so much.
Yeah, I shouldn't say this because people think we set this up this way, but yeah, I 100% agree. And that's what I've written about, and this is what I believe. This is how I came through my career. Is I had no background in what I sold. I was always selling over my head to some degree. I was in complex technology fields, and I had no technical training. I'm a smart guy. I learned as much as I could about it. As for a layperson, I was smart, but what got me in the door and got the conversation started was relationship skills.
Right. It still matters. Will matter more in the future, in my estimation.
Oh, I agree. Jeffrey Colvin wrote about it. Have you read his book, Humans Are Underrated?
No, I haven't read it.
Yeah, you'd enjoy it because he talks about it specifically and talks about the research that's been done in that regard. People are coming to the conclusion is the ability to form a human relationship with another person will become one of the critical skills in the 21st century.
Well, you're reading the same kind of stuff I read. So when you read something like *Sapiens* or *Homo Deus*, the second, one of his books, and you read Robin Dunbar, and you start looking at when people are looking forward at technology, I'm looking backwards to say, what are the principles that haven't changed for 6,000 years? Or if you want to go maybe for 1.5 million years, what hasn't changed? And social groomings, the cost of relationships, the management of relationships, the survival of groups of people who produce better results than other competing groups because of cooperation and collaboration and all of these kinds of concepts. When you start looking at that, you have to say, the reason that we got this far is because some principles that are far greater than a technology. Okay, so the technology counts for a lot, fine. But what are the things that are not going to change and maybe more pronounced? And I think those are the areas where you put your focus.
Right, and 20 years of rapid technological evolution isn't going to change those.
It doesn't change those.
No, but I mean, there are people that are in this field in sales. You may be one that's listening to this and watching this. Is that, yeah, the way people are gathering information has changed dramatically. We're all aware of that. But no one has said suddenly the value of relationships has changed. One of the things, some of the disconnect we're seeing in certain elements of our society is that people aren't paying attention to some of these fundamentals the way that they need to, and we'll see people coming back to them.
I continue to tell young people sexting isn't going to replace actual sex. I'm very confident in this bet that I'm making. I'm very long human behaviors that are 3.5 million years old.
Yeah. Well, even to your point about 6,000 years old, right? I mean, sort of back to sort of the start of established societies and so on is, you think about it. Somebody said, somebody's having this conversation with me last week about millennials make decisions so much differently. So when they're buyers, it's going to be completely different. And I'm saying, well, no, it's not, right? Because, they're not going to want to necessarily buy, my opinion is, they're not going to feel comfortable buying from a text message, as someone might think, just use an extreme example, is if you have a career at stake, you have a job at stake, you have an outcome at stake in your business, you're going to know the people you're doing business with. And it's not going to be a superficial relationship. You want to really understand them.
The mistake that they're making, and I think that the market, the economy is being pulled in two very, very different directions. And one is super transactional. I have a great relationship with Amazon.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know a single person there. I don't have a single, I know no one there. But because getting this book, sent to me, this book, I can have this book sent to me. It's the same book I'm going to get at the bookstore, except I don't have to go to the bookstore to get it. So I can get that book shipped here. This is a $17 decision that I'm making.
Right.
That's fine. I'm also buying a house. Okay, so that's a significantly bigger decision. And I'm probably going to get some help to have somebody tell me what the house is really worth. Tell me areas in the house that I may need to look at as I make a decision as to whether or not to buy it. I'm going to get some help on somebody who knows a lot more than I do. And so they think everything is going transactional. So the SaaS companies and scientific materialists, people who think that, love is a serotonin drip and, there's no actual real emotional thing going on. They think that everything is going to be transactional in the future, but it's not. And so there are decisions that we make that require a super relational relationship where if I'm going to spend $3 million to transform my business, I'm going to get somebody really smart who knows how to do this work, who's done it before, who has a set of experiences I don't have, who understands things and has seen things and understands the trade-offs that one person might make that gets a better result than another group. Mm-hmm. And you're going to rely on that. And that has been true. And, I've tried to make this point. The concept of trusted advisor, go to the Bible. Go to the Bible and look. I mean, the pharaohs had smart people around them to shore up their weaknesses in areas that they didn't know. I mean, and this has been through all of history, leaders have found people who said, fill the gap for me, whether it's an oracle in Greece, or a pharaoh or a business leader, or Don Corleone with Tom Hayden in The Godfather. I mean, take your pick. There's never been... You like the last one. Yeah. There's never been a time when you didn't need somebody to come in and help you understand the strategic outcomes that you're trying to get, to give you different views and to give you better insight. That's just not going to change for millennials either. We all are going to want to take care of our kids, get married, find a partner, build a life together. Mm-hmm. All those things tend to be universal. It's interesting because as somebody who gets to travel around the world and speak to people, we're very much alike everywhere I go. Even though we will point out the small differences, everyone's very much alike.
Yeah, and I think this whole idea with making decisions is that what you don't eliminate, as you talked about, you address sort of tangentially, is with your $3 million decision, there's more risk.
Right.
And once you start,
huge risk.
Right. And so once risk is injected into a situation, one of the reasons people want to talk to other humans when they're making decisions about that is, they want some external validation. As you said, they want somebody to fill in the gaps. They're mitigating risk.
They want certainty.
Yeah. And so that comes from, not necessarily from a white paper that you're delivering, but, but it could to some degree. That will help. It's not like there's no value there. But at the end of the day, it's the humans. When I was talking to the New York City Enterprise Sales Forum, is I raised my hand. I said, okay, well, show me a show of hands. I said, if your, most of them are SaaS companies, if your annual contract value is over, or lifetime contract value, excuse me, it was over $100,000. A bunch of people raised their hand. I said, okay, so how many of you travel to see a prospect to close a deal? Virtually none of them. I said, that's interesting. So $100,000 deal, you can't afford a $350 plane ticket to go close the order. I said, because if I was competing against you, I'd be on the plane and I'd win.
You'd win
100% of those deals.
You'd win. There'd be no contest. I had a client who said to me, I had a meeting and he said, you didn't have to come all the way here to see me. And I said, I know, I just wanted to.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's the difference, is you think that the physical presence doesn't matter, and it does. And the physical presence means that you care more. It's proof that you care more because you got on a plane and came all this way to see me. And I think we still, I don't know what you're going to call this podcast. Like, it's the human, stupid, or something. It's the human. You have to pay attention.
That's the title of my next book.
It's the human, stupid. Yeah. I'll buy that book.
All right.
That's what it is. So you underestimate the fact of just your physical presence showing up there to say, I care enough about you to sit down and really understand what you need. Well, how could that not create a preference for you? And selling is about conversations. It's about commitments. But in large part, it's about creating a preference to buy from you instead of someone else. Well, how do you create that preference? Well, I don't want to spend $350 on a $100,000 lifetime value with a 62% net margin.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, so you're not good at math either.
Right.
You're not good at humans and you can't do math. Like, this is the easiest decision on earth. If I told you for $350, you could get this $100,000 client with greater certainty, you're like, I'm making that bet for $350. That's a simple bet, right?
Yeah, it continues to amaze me. I mean, it's just the math. Listen, is so simple, and we're talking about math, right? Because
we're talking about arithmetic. We're not even really talking about math. This isn't, this isn't any kind of algebraic equation.
No, not doing quadratic equations, right? Thank God, right? That's why I went into sales, so I wouldn't have to do that stuff.
We just have to add
and subtract. That's all we have to worry about. Multiply too. That's
multiply's good.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. I think and you raised the point earlier, is I think for people to understand too, is it's not just people you're selling to. I mean, this gets back to the relationships in general. When, if you're building a career, if you're building yourself, I had this conversation with my son, who's my partner on the sales house, and he's a millennial and really extremely smart kid. But we're talking about engaging with a vendor that'd be a strategic vendor for us, and we sort of narrowed down the pool. I said, well, if we decide he's the one, let's get on a plane, let's go see him, or fly him out to see us. Mm-hmm. and so the first words out of his mouth was, well, it's kind of old school. And it's like, no, this is how you cement things, right?
That's not old school. That's school.
It's school, right?
That's just school. Yeah, right. That's what that is.
But it's just important. You're going to build these relationships that are important for what you're doing and important to your success in life or in business. Invest in the time with that person. I mean, not all of them merit that, right?
Right.
But those
and
that
not all of them turn out to be the relationship that you want or need or hope for. But the ones that do matter more than anything. And I mean, I remember me, you, Mark Hunter, Mike Weinberg, sitting at a restaurant how many years ago?
In Chicago, right?
In Chicago.
5?
Maybe
6,
more.
7?
Maybe 6. Yeah. Yeah. And
first time we had met?
Gibson Steakhouse. I remember where.
Yeah. On Rush Street or something. Yeah.
Right over there. Yeah. That was this little group. We got together in Chicago and we had 21 of us show up to get to be in a room together.
Mm-hmm.
And those relationships still exist, which, explains the value of a relationship.
No, absolutely. Yeah, it's the first time I met you, first time I met Weinberg, Mark. Actually, I think I've seen Mark in person subsequent to that. I still think so. I know I've seen you and Weinberg in person.
Is it?
Yeah.
Gosh, it doesn't feel like that to me.
Oh, I know. Well, that's
because of this, I think.
Yeah, because of this. So the power of video. Well, one question I was going to ask is, and it sort of relates a little bit to what we're talking about, but Jeb Blunt, who wrote the foreword to your book, had a very strong statement in there, which was that the sales profession has gotten soft.
Mm-hmm.
So he said you're in violent agreement with that. So, so what was meant by that, and why do you think that is?
I think it's this reaction to Glengarry Glen Ross and that stereotype. So if closing is bad, then not asking for a commitment at all is good. And if interrupting people is bad, then you have to just wait and connect with people on LinkedIn and try to share things until somebody reaches out to you. If being liked is something that you want, not likable or not even just having a relationship, but if you can't say anything that makes the customer unhappy because the buyer has all of the power in the relationship, and I read all these things go by on LinkedIn. The buyer has all the power in the relationship. There's nothing you can do to create value for them. You just serve them when they make requests for information. And I'm looking at it going, you have a very, very different idea about this profession than I do. And so it's gotten so soft. Like, you can't interrupt anybody. You have to wait until they engage with you. And the customer will tell you when they want to take the next step. Well, how the hell do they know what the next step is? So just think about this for a minute. So it's an ERP. Let's just say ERP, the most complicated thing I can think of. So it's a root canal, a colonoscopy, a brain surgery.
I've bought it.
And
I've been on a committee buying it. Yeah.
Yeah. So quadruple bypass at the same time, right? It's the worst thing you could ever have to do. How many times does the buyer do that in their life? Probably twice, but they hope only once, right? You never want to have to rip everything out, the guts of the business and start over again. How many times does the company that sells ERP do this? Every single day of their life. Every single day of their life, this is all they do, is help people with an enterprise resource planning software solution. That's all they do. So who should know how that conversation needs to go and what the client needs to do to get from their current state to a future state? Should the client, who has almost no experience, or the experience of one company maybe a few times, or somebody who does it every single day of their life, surrounded by 100 or 1,000 or 12,000 other individuals that only do that? And so I don't understand the idea. And I think what they're doing is telling salespeople they have to be way softer than they have to be. Like, you can't interrupt people. You have to let them
like making a cold call or something,
or interrupt their thinking by telling them that what they're doing isn't right. They've got their own buying committee, and they're 57% through the process before they ever get to you. It's like, well, if they're 57, what process? And so this is, we're going to go back to linearity for just a minute, but how can there be a buying process? There's 14 people sitting there.
There's not.
So there's at least 14 buying processes. And I would say, when there's 14 people in a room, there's 27 buying processes going on, because they're conflicted themselves. Each individual has conflict. Like, I'm not sure this is the right thing. So how do you pretend that everything that we do in sales, back to one of your small criticisms made with love about the SaaS company, you have a slide deck, and the process starts on the left and it ends on the right, and it goes specifically A, B, C, D, all the way to Z, and it ends right there. Really? You've never worked with human beings, because it goes A, B, C, B. No, really? B again? Yeah, B again.
We may do A again.
B. I'm down at F. I'm ready to buy right now. No, we're not to F. You got to come back here. And, it just doesn't work this way. And you have to be the person that understands how to create value for other people. It's your job to be the trusted advisor. So you have to have the advice. And then the second thing is the people say, I want to be consultative, or if they pronounce it the other way, they want to be consultative. Either way, I get what they're saying. But a consultant comes in and tells you, I'm going to give you the advice on how best to get the results you want for your business right now. That's what a consultant does. A consultant doesn't come in and say, listen, tell me what you think comes next, and I'll see what we can do to help you. A consultant comes in and says, this is what comes next, and here's why, and let me help you get the result that you're really looking for. And so you tell people they can't dispense with their advice except for in a blog post on LinkedIn. Incorrect. Incorrect. That you need to be sitting face to face with people. You need to interrupt them. You need to share new ideas that challenge their thinking. I mean, it's complicated, but I think it's too soft. I think we've gotten too soft. I'm not saying go back to Glengarry Glen Ross. I mean, that always be closing when closing means telling them that they had to skip the whole process and just buy makes no sense at all. I wrote a whole book about this.
Right.
But knowing what comes next and helping people do it even when they don't want to. The chapter that the publisher didn't want to put in The Lost Art of Closing was chapter 15, Fearing the Wrong Danger. The client feels the wrong danger. They think, well, changing is going to be difficult and I'm afraid that something's going to happen. Well, not changing is more difficult. And we don't want to have the difficult conversation because we don't want them to say, I don't like what you're saying and I don't want to do business with you because I don't like what you're saying. But if you've ever had a great relationship with a client, they didn't like what you were saying at the beginning, more than likely. Like, I don't want to do this. My gosh, I mean, it's so much work, but I know it's the right thing to do. And then you help them do that.
Yeah, and I totally agree. I mean, it's. I wonder, and part of my belief is that I wouldn't have necessarily used the word soft, but I think that part of what's happening is that, again, there's this, propaganda campaign, if you will, that says, look, sales is this linear transactional thing, even in complex environments. And if you just do a certain amount of activities, you're going to get a certain result, which is generally true, right? If you do a large enough universe of sample sizes, enough samples, you're going to get a certain result that you want a certain number of times. And then what they do is this, they multiply what's at the top of the funnel instead of really focusing on what's in the bottom. But that is attractive to people because they know, look, it's just, if I just do a certain number of things, a certain number of outcomes are going to exist.
And so you just scale up by multiplying the number.
Right.
And so it's the mistake of taking efficiency and believing efficiency is effectiveness.
Yeah.
And they're different. You can be really, really efficient and get a very poor result, which is what most of us do when we send a newsletter pitch out. I'm saying 80,000 people are going to resonate with this exact message. No, 2,000 of them are. Right. I mean, that's it. But rather than saying, I need to change the message to improve it to get that 2,000 to 3,000, I'm just going to send another email. Okay, well, they already didn't like that email. And you're sending it again to the same group of people. But that's basically what we do. And so when people, in the book, Eat Their Lunch, I go back over a script saying, Andy, I'd love to share with you an executive briefing on the 4 trends that are probably going to have the biggest impact on your podcast over the next 18 to 24 months. I'm going to share with you some of the things that Google's done, some things that are going on in SEO. And listen, I'm going to leave you with a deck at the end of this call. And you're probably going to make some decisions to do some things different. And whether there's a next step for me or not, I promise you're going to sit down with your team and probably have some serious conversations about how you're going to adjust to these. And I'll share some ideas with you. What do you look like Thursday for a 20-minute executive briefing? What I'm trying to do is trade enough value for you to say, that's interesting to me. I'd like to know what those things are. But people still say, Andy, it's Anthony, and I help people with podcasts like yours. I'd love to stop by, introduce myself, tell you about my company, and love to learn a little bit more about you. What do you look like Thursday for a meeting? Well, what does meeting mean? Is that an hour? Am I going to have to throw you out of my office because you won't leave and you're going to spend the first half hour trying to develop rapport with me by telling me your kids play soccer like my kids? The trade of value is too low.
Well, and also, most people wouldn't have suggested a specific time to have a call anyway. So it would just been, what do you look like over the next few weeks?
Yeah. Well, it's a little broad. I'm busy washing my hair most of that time, or at least my eyebrows. But they get look at this and they think, well, the thing that I did last week, it's not the call that doesn't work. It's the language choice that you make. So you can make more calls if you want to. But if you want to improve the ratio of yeses you get, then you have to improve the value that you're trading for that meeting. Because when you get a no to a meeting request, what somebody is telling you is, I did not hear enough value in that offer for me to accept it and trade my time for it. So double down and call more numbers and call faster and call harder if you want to. But to improve the effectiveness, I have to change the message to something that they say, that's value I would trade for. And that's a very different a different view of things than somebody who believes just go harder, faster.
Right. And I think this is I'm seeing a trend already, this love affair with sort of this, heavily rigid process, conformity, to conformity is what I call it. I find it interesting that, again, in the SaaS business where, these companies were created to disrupt markets, and yet they use these sales processes that are based on conformity and rigidness and so on, but compliance. I think that's changing. I think that bit by bit we're seeing companies that are saying, yeah, this isn't really scalable the way we're trying to do it.
But reality doesn't really care what your theory is. And it really doesn't care about your feelings or your opinions. So at some point you can double down and double down and double down again. And then at some point realize, like, wait a second, the reality here is that this isn't working. It's not improving things. Now I have to start looking elsewhere. But it can take people a longer period of time than you imagine to stick with their beliefs and cling to their view that this is a repeatable process, that all I have to do is turn the volume up on this to create greater sales, which doesn't tend to be true.
No, but it's, as you might expect on this podcast, I've talked to a lot of senior executives from those type of companies that practice that particular sales process. And I would say the vast majority of them aren't thinking about, how do I change this close rate from 1 out of every 5, from 20% to 21% this year, 22, 23. No, I've got a model that works. I know how to harvest X% of the things that come in the top of the funnel. Let's just put more in the top.
I get the LinkedIn pitch every day about people who want to do lead generation for me.
I get 3 a day. You only get 1 a day. I get 3.
with digital marketing. And
right.
I just think to myself, so the right way to get leads in today's day and age is to have digital marketing and to build a funnel that attracts people into it. But the person who tells me they're the greatest expert at doing this sends LinkedIn pitches instead of using the same tactic that they're telling me I should be using.
Right.
Why do you not have a digital funnel of people begging you to help them do what you're doing to get them into your funnel? Why are you on LinkedIn?
Mm-hmm.
But again, it must work just enough that they actually believe it's a viable strategy.
I think that's
So I've been offered sales training a half a dozen times in the last 2 weeks.
Yeah, I've had maybe one on the sales training. It always amazes me. People obviously aren't looking at my profile. They're on LinkedIn and they're not looking on my profile. Why would I want sales training? I mean, why would I want sales training?
Well, I'm happy to take sales training, but the kind of person that would reach out to me on LinkedIn to offer me sales training is maybe not the person that I would buy it from personally, because that's a person who didn't even look at my profile.
Yeah. Yeah, the point I was making. So, all right, Anthony, we could go on forever. I think we have. Could. I think we have almost.
Forever is here.
Forever is here.
Well, it's clear that I miss you then.
Yeah, we'll have to do this more frequently.
Talk to. Yes, agreed.
So tell people they can find out more about your excellent new book.
Eat Their Lunch, and you can get it on Amazon.com. If you buy it in bulk, you'll want to do that at 800 CEO Read because they're going to have the best price and they're the best book people on earth. So go to 800 CEO Read for that. You can also find out at eattheirlunchbook.com. And there's a website there with some more information about the book and the ability to get some training videos and a workbook.
Excellent. So who had the URL for Eat Their Lunch?
Somebody has eattheirlunch.com. Yeah.
I was wondering who it was. I'll have to look that up.
I would like that. It's really interesting how that works too. The first book that I almost named 17 Elements, I tried to buy 17elements.com and I couldn't get that. And then I tried 17E. Do you know what a three spaces like E, what was it? 17E. So 2 digits and a letter.com. Those start at about $35,000. Oh. And I tried to buy it and they sent me a note telling me it's $35,000. I said, I'll give you some number far less than that.
Yeah.
And they said, no way, basically go to hell. And 2 years later, they're like, do you still want 17E? And I'm like, I didn't even name the book that. So now I told you it was worth a certain amount to me when you had the chance to do it, but you said no, sorry about that.
Yeah,
so
it's too late.
Someday somebody's going to want to say like, hey, you should buy eattheirlunch.com, but that ship has sailed.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I've got
Good to
stories
see
about
you.
that too. Good to see you as well. And yeah, good luck on the book, and we'll look forward to talking again shortly.
Okay, see you soon.
All right, thanks.
Okay, friends, that was Accelerate for the week. First of all, as always, I want to thank you for joining me. And I want to thank my guest, Anthony Iannarino. Join me again next week as I welcome Matt Suggs to the show. Matt is the Executive Vice President of MediaFly. And we're going to be talking about how to provide interactive buying experiences to help you win more deals. A lot of focus these days on the buying experience, the customer experience. We're talking all about that. Be sure to join us then. Before you go, don't forget to check out the Sales House, the all-in-one sales learning, coaching, mentoring, and growth program for B2B sellers. Visit thesaleshouse.com. I look forward to seeing you there. So thanks again for joining me. Until next week, I'm your host, Andy Paul. Good selling, everyone.
RingDNA is the leading sales enablement platform that uses AI to help scale business growth. Trusted by the top companies across the globe, RingDNA offers a suite of powerful tools for every sales role. The RingDNA Dialer radically improves sales productivity and call connection rates, while guided selling helps reps know exactly what to do and when to do it. Conversation AI uses artificial intelligence to surface the most impactful coaching opportunities in real time. So, no matter where your team is working from, the RingDNA platform can help them exponentially increase call connections, opportunities, and revenue. Learn more at ringdna.com/platform. That's ringdna.com/platform.